Okay, let's review, first of all, some of the names of some of the players that are critical to the story. I did that a few weeks ago to help flesh out all the new players we're going to encounter. As you know, there's a revolution in progress. Avshalom, the son of David, the one who killed Amnon, who had raped Avshalom's full sister, or part sister, Tamar. And now Avshalom had fled to Geshur, the foreign country of which his non-Jewish mother, who later converted to Judaism, had come from. And David, at the suggestion of Yoav, had brought him back from Geshur to Jerusalem, but held him under a sort of house arrest. And then they seemed to get back together. When Avshalom tried to get Yoav to speak to his father about coming back home, and when Yoav initially blew him off, Avshalom had one of his assistants set fire to Yoav's winery, his vineyard. And Yoav then said, "What was that all about?" And Avshalom said, "I'm trying to reach you. You're blowing me off. And I came all the way back from Geshur just to be in house arrest. Was better off there." So Yoav did a rapprochement for Avshalom with his father, but it didn't work. Avshalom was hurt emotionally, sensitively, that his father did not pay a Shiva call when his sons died, and that his father had him locked up all that time, and that his father never engaged with the children after the rape of Tamar, and was not part of, like, what kind of father are you? You're taking care of the whole country, but your own kids, there's a rape in your own house, and there's a kill, and you're not involved with us. And this is serious stuff. And then he felt his sons died, and Avshalom decided to throw out his father, maybe even kill him, and become the king. So he started hanging around outside the palace, glad-handing people who were coming to the palace for judicial decisions to bring their cases before King David, the arbitrator and judge. And Avshalom would convince them that, if I were the judge, you'd get better justice. And then he finally made his move, a rebellion. And we're now with the rebellion. So first of all, let's refresh our memory of the actors. Here we go. Many of these are names we will be encountering, have not yet encountered. Achitophel. He's a brilliant man, maybe the wisest of his time. He was the top advisor to King David. He deserted King David, joined Avshalom. The Hebrew name is Absalom. If you've ever met or heard of someone named Absalom, this is the source of that name. He turned to Avshalom, who was exceptionally wise on the level of a prophet. He was not a prophet. He was not a Kohen with Urim and Tumim. Chushai was an elderly, sage-like man who was part of David's retinue, all the people who went with David. And David sent him back. David said to Chushai, essentially, you're an old man. If we have a battle, you're going to get killed, or we're going to have people watch over you. If you really want to be helpful, go back to Avshalom and tell him, all your life you were my advisor, and you're loyal to the family, not to me, but the family. And now that it appears that Avshalom will be the new king from the family, you're offering your services, your advisory services to him. And your goal is to subvert him and sabotage him by giving him bad advice. and being a counterweight to Achitophel. If Achitophel gives good advice for pursuing the rebellion and executing it to success, offer alternative advice that will cause the rebellion to fail. Achitophel was from Gilo, which is not part of our story, but it would be a shame for me not to mention that Gilo, which does not play a big role in the Tanakh, is near Yerushalayim and plays a big role nowadays. Gilo is in eastern Yerushalayim, a suburb of Yerushalayim, one of the most contentious parts of the land that Israel liberated in the 1967 war. The reason it's so important is that Gilo is now a suburb of 35,000 people. Israel's never giving it up. And the Arabs will never make peace unless they get Gilo also. The Arabs will not compromise on an inch. This is not theory, we know it. Bill Clinton has talked about how he gave Arafat everything, basically, and Ehud Olmert and Ehud Barak, they offered him everything but an inch here and an inch there. And Arafat made clear, not an inch. And he started an intifada rather than give up an inch. They will never give up an inch, certainly not of East Jerusalem. And everyone else is just fooling themselves. Macron in France and Keir Starmer in England with David Lammy, his horrific foreign secretary, and Mark Carney in Canada, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. They're all kidding themselves. There's never going to be a two-state solution. It's not only about whether God gave us the land, it's just not practicable. It's not going to happen. There's almost 1 million Jews living in Judea. Nobody stops to think, how are you going to get 1 million Jews out of Judea, Samaria? How are you going to get Jews out of East Jerusalem, give up the Temple Mount, the Holy Wall? Anyway, Gilo is so important that when Obama sent Hillary Clinton, his Secretary of State, to go to Jerusalem and to tell Netanyahu that Obama means business. He's not one of the Bushes. He means business. No more building in Jerusalem. Israel announced, okay, we're just going to, they announced, while she was in Israel, I think, they announced they're giving out building permits in Gilo. And she flew back in a rage, and the whole place was wild. Because whereas to Jews in Israel, it's a suburb of Yerushalayim, she understood, Arafat understood, the whole point is you're giving up Gilo, not building more houses. Here's a picture of Gilo. This is Gilo. This is Gilo. They're not giving this up. Never. Okay, back to our story. There were 2 Kohens at the time. There's normally 1 Kohen Gadol, 1 High Kohen. But in an anomaly of history, there were 2 at that time. Excuse me. Tzadok and Evyatar. Tzadok and Evyatar. Evyatar is a Kohen who descended from Eli the Kohen at the time that Samuel was not yet born, when Hannah was crying in the famous Rosh Hashanah Haftarah at Shiloh for a baby. And the Kohen went to her and said, you look like you're drunk. And she said, no, I'm overwhelmed. I'm praying to God for a baby. And it emerged that if I get a baby boy, if I get a baby boy, I will give him to you for you to rear him as like your assistant Kohen. He's not going to be a Kohen, he's Levi, but he'll be there under your guard. And so that was Evyatar. Eventually, Eli had children, Hophni and Pinchas. They sinned. God punished Eli because of his sons, said that you're the holiest man in Israel, Kohen Gadol. Everyone knows your sons Hophni and Pinchas are your successors. And instead of having reared them to be holy men, They have failed, and they've given a bad name and reputation to the kahuna, the priesthood, so to speak. Therefore, the kahuna will be taken away from your family. Down the line of lineage, at some point, God said, I'm going to take the kahuna away from your lineage that stems from Elazar the Kohen, son of Aaron the Kohen, and I'm going to give it to a descendant instead of Pinchas. He will be a new Kohen, and that would become, so Evyatar descended from Eli, and it was his fate that the kahuna would be taken from him and given over to Tzadok from the line of Pinchas. Okay, you're not going to be given an exam on this, but just a general overview of who's in play here. And Evyatar and Tzadok both will be Kohanim, throughout this chapter. Evyatar will lose his kahuna later, at the very end of David's life, when David's son Adoniyahu attempts yet another rebellion before Solomon, Shlomo, becomes king. And Evyatar will go with Adoniah and thereby lose his kahuna to Tzadok, who will stay with Shlomo. Again, you're not being tested on this, just to put it into your gray cells. Okay, each of them had a son who would be a messenger, simply a messenger. As part of this whole story, David is sending Chushai to be a spy within Avshalom's camp, and Chushai will get the words out. How's his message? How's he going to be able to get his spy info back to David in David's encampment on the other side of the Jordan River? There are going to be the Kohanim. The Kohanim are going to be there. Their sons, Achimaatz, the son of Tzadok, and Yonatan, the son of Evyatar, will be the messenger boys. And they will be given what to bring back to David. Okay. In our story, Tzadok and Evyatar are the Kohen Gadol. Now we're going to encounter Itai the Gittite. The town is Gath. That's where Goliath is from. It's Philistine, where today the Gaza Strip. The Gaza Strip is part of Eretz Israel. King Shimshon, Samson, was based in that area of the Gaza Strip. The story of Samson in the book of Judges, Shoftim, takes place in the Gaza Strip. Gaza is part of Eretz Israel. In Hebrew, Aza, with an iron. Long story, before Gaza were the Philistines. We know Eretz Israel, the Jews came in and took the land, the promised land, from the nations that were there. And the Philistines were there, and Goliath was a Philistine who, of course, tried to kill David, that famous story, David and Goliath. In later generations, the descendant was Itai. And the Gittites, the people from Gath, not only Itai, the Gittites became allied with the Jews and with David's faction. Just as today in our lifetimes, if you follow the news out of Israel, up north in Israel are the Druze, D-R-U-Z-E. And the Druze, singular and plural, same word. The Druze are an Arab-like, Muslim-like people, but they're not exactly. And some of them live in northern Israel, and some live on the other side of the border in southern Syria. The ones in northern Israel fight in the IDF. Many are officers and generals and heroes, have seats in the Knesset. In Syria, they're loyal to Syria, but they have lost their loyalty because the Syrians massacre them. And to retain their loyalty to Israel, Netanyahu and his army have been bombing. Israeli jets have been bombing southern Syria, areas from which the people who are massacring the Druze have been coming. So just as today, the non-Jewish Druze are tight with Israel, in those days, the Gittites from Gath in Gaza were tight with Israel, and particularly in the rebellion with King David. Ittai was a giant. He had, what's the name of that model that's now doing those American Eagle things, that she has good genes? So that's some advertising campaign. That is some advertising campaign. I had never heard of that actress. I'm an Orthodox rabbi. It doesn't mean you're not allowed. I mean, from what I understand, I looked it up yesterday on Wikipedia. Who is she and what's that program? What made her famous? And I've never heard of her. But because of the scandal of this advertising campaign, she has good genes, playing on a pun, G and a J. So Ittai had the genes with a G. He's a giant, like Goliath, but he did not have the same political leanings. And his name, the rabbis point out, like the letters Aleph, Yud, Tav, Yud. Im eshkachech Yerushalayim, tishkach yemini, and many, many Israeli men today have the name Ittai, including Ittai in our class, who's named for the Ittai of the tribe of Benjamin in Shmuel Bet, chapter 23. We'll get to that. Siva. Now here's the other group, 3 people, and then we're done with this. Then we go to text, and we've been refreshed. Siva. To remind you, we can take this off the screen now. Let's just go back to the public. To remind you, King Saul died at war. Jonathan, his son, died with him at war against the Philistines. David had a loving, lifelong brotherhood. David and Jonathan. In today's perverted world, there are those who write papers and scholarly papers trying to argue that David and Jonathan were homosexuals, since the Tanakh talks about their love, the love of David and Jonathan. That's because we live in a perverted world with perverts. At least I can talk honestly in a synagogue class, or at least in a synagogue, or it's my synagogue, because there's synagogues where you can't even say the truth, even Orthodox synagogues. Only a pervert would say that David was a homosexual. We know what the Torah's position is on homosexuality. And we're not going to get into the politics of modern-day LGBTQIA+. The suggestion that in biblical times that a king of Israel would have been Mashuach, would have been anointed by the prophet Samuel, Shmuel, and would be the progenitor of Mashiach, whose son would build the Beit HaMikdash. It's just so insane that no one even would have thought of such a stupid thing until the modern era. It is possible for 2 men to have a very deep love that has nothing to do with sex, in the same way that certain women have a deep love. I have a very deep love for a particular Chinese guy. Denise knows him, and he loves me, Peter. And for, 1994, for 31 years now, every September, October, for 31 years, whether he's that year in usually Washington State, but there have been years that he's been all over the world working in different places. He flies in once a year to spend a weekend with me. We have a very deep love, goes back 31 years. And it's not homosexual. And I have 2 or 3 other friends like that. My friend Matt from my years in college 30 years ago, and my friend Rabbi Steve. And you, whether it's a male or female, you could have a deep friend. So that's subject covered also. David promised Yonatan and vice versa. Whoever dies first, the other will take care of their children. Yonatan died first. And one of his children, Mephibosheth was that little boy who, while the Philistines were overrunning the Israel camp and killing Saul and Jonathan, the nurse picked up Mephibosheth and ran in frantic hope for safety from the pursuing Philistines. And she fell, and the little legs, the little bones of baby Mephibosheth was shattered, and he remained lame his entire life. Siva, Sadi Yud Vez Aleph, or Tiva, Siva was designated as his major domo to be in charge of all the property and land and palace that belonged to Mephibosheth by dint of inheritance. Siva had 15 children, sons, and they had people. So he had a retinue of 35 people to take care of. And he had plenty with which to take care of them. In the story we're going to cover now, Siva is going to come to David after David has fled across a river and is hiding for his life with his people. Siva is going to come there with all kinds of goods, food goods, and horses, donkeys. And he's going to say, I've brought all of this for you to protect you. But you know, my master, Mephibosheth, he's not here with me because he's hoping you fall. Because if you die, then your son Avshalom temporarily will be king, and there will be a counter-revolution, and Mephibosheth expects he will become king. So he's rooting for you to die. Well, you got a question here. Is that true? Or is Mephibosheth unable to defend himself because he's lame and he can't call an Uber? He relies on Siva for his transportation, has no idea even what Siva's up to. So maybe Siva's telling the truth, maybe not. And then the other two players, and then we go into the text, the other two that I want to introduce you to at this point, Sheva ben Bikri and Amasa. Okay. Sheva ben Bikri is let's take that down for a moment. Sheva ben Bikri is a member of the tribe of Benjamin. Remember, the Benjaminites hate David. A lot of them have come to love him. But there is a residual number of Benjaminites who feel that the kingdom had been given to us. And we don't accept that it's been taken away and given to the tribe of Judah. The descendant of Saul should have been the next king, and so on and so forth. And we expected jobs, by the way. We were going to be the advantaged tribe. So a lot of us don't accept that David became king. And I gave you the example in the United States, in American history, the first several presidents were from Virginia. And the people of Virginia thought they're going to always be the most important state. President 1, Washington, Virginia. Adams, Massachusetts. Number 3, Jefferson, Virginia. Number 4, Madison, Virginia. Number 5, Monroe, James Monroe, Virginia. Number 6, Adams Kidd, 2 from Massachusetts. And so on and so forth. Number 9, William Henry Harrison, Virginia. Number 10, John Tyler, Virginia. That's why the United States Capitol was moved from New York to Philadelphia to right near Virginia, Washington, D.C. And then things changed as history unfolded, and Virginia no longer was the source of American presidents. So when there was a civil war, Virginia was at the lead of the South, trying to take down the new government that had emerged over the course of time, where Virginia no longer mattered the same way. You may have heard of the FFV, with V, the First Families of Virginia. That was like being from the like from being able to say that you had been from the Mayflower. That was like yichus. That was lineage. Like saying, I'm a descendant of the Chafetz Chaim, or I'm a descendant of the Vilna Gaon, or simply I'm a Kohen. So that's how they made that play on it within Orthodox Judaism in America. People talk about that they have the special lineage, that they're not FFV, but FFB, from birth. And most FFBs have no idea that expression stems from the first families of Virginia. See what you learn in our class. So he was a hater. He hated David. He was from Shimi ben Gera, and he cursed David. And they had one or two like that, and they're important. They're going to come up. When David's down, overthrown, on the verge of being killed, they show their true colors. And finally, Amasa. Amasa is David's nephew. Initially, he's the chief of staff of the military under Avshalom. Everybody's got a chief of staff. David has Yoav. The house of Saul had Avner ben Ner, Abner, until Yoav killed him after that stuff. And now Amasa, David's nephew, was the chief of military staff to Avshalom. At the end of Avshalom's rebellion, when he was killed, Amasa came back, and David did something like Abraham Lincoln, with malice towards none and charity toward all. He forgave Amasa for being on the wrong side, and even named Amasa his new chief of staff, replacing Yoav. Last time that happened was when David named Avner chief of staff, replacing Yoav. Yoav killed Avner. Yoav killed Avshalom, even though David ordered, don't hurt him if he falls in the rebellion. So I'll leave it up to you to expect what's going to happen to Amasa. And that's a review of all the players in this very, very busy chapter that comes up. We started immediately. Here we go. Reminding you, we're going to race through the first 10 Pesukim, which we did last time when we left off. There were 200 Jerusalemites who accompanied, let's make it bigger for you. Let's bring it up to 150. All right. There were 200 Jerusalemites accompanying Avshalom. They were invited and went in good faith, suspecting nothing. You may remember, Avshalom said to his father David, may I have leave to go to the city of Hebron and offer sacrifices to God, now that you've accepted me, to thank God that you have accepted me as your son. May I offer sacrifices in the city where our forefathers are buried, Abraham and Sarah, Yitzchak and Rivka, Yaakov and Leah. Rachel, of course, is buried in Beit Lechem. And David said, sure. And Avshalom said, may I bring two people with me as witnesses? In Torah law, if you're doing something that requires witnessing, you need two witnesses, two kosher. David said, sure. So Avshalom went throughout the area to 100 different people. Would you come with me as my escort to Hebron? I'm the prince of Jerusalem. I'm the prince of Israel. Sure. Why are you honoring me? Well, you just happen to be here, and you look like a good guy. But, I need two witnesses. Let's just pull this guy here. Excuse me, sir. Will you join with my friend here? I need two witnesses. And he did that to 100 different people. And he brought 200 people, all understanding that the other 198 are his retinue, and I alone am one of the two witnesses he's bringing. Why isn't he using the other 198 for witnesses? I don't know. Maybe they're not Shomer Shabbat, so they're not kosher. Maybe they have one of the or another of the disqualifications, or they're related. For whatever reason, I'm one of the two. So 200 people went in good faith, not aware that what Avshalom did was he essentially brought 200 people under his father's nose without his father understanding what was going on. And I gave you the example the last class we did of how Jeb Magruder, when in the Civil War, when George McClellan just wouldn't use the army. McClellan was the commander-in-chief of the northern armies. Well, Lincoln was commander-in-chief as president, and McClellan was the chief of staff. And he had a humongous army, and he just was always afraid to fight. And he just kept drilling them and drilling them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, left, right. And he never went to battle. And the South, under Robert E. Lee, figured out that he's a chicken. It took a while, but they couldn't figure out, why isn't he fighting? Guy's a chicken. And he's not going to fight until he's convinced that his men are ready, and he's never going to be convinced. He's either a chicken or he's a perfectionist. And one of the strategies that Robert E. Lee came up with was he had Magruder take like 200 people, and he had them marching in a circle. And from a distance, as McClellan used his binoculars to take a look, from a distance, what's going on? McClellan had the misconception. He thought Magruder has thousands of soldiers, because they never stop marching. They just keep coming and coming and coming. Well, that was the idea, really, that by bringing 200 people, it would appear to the general citizenry from Hebron to Yerushalayim that there's an uprising, and 200 already have joined Avshalom's army. And these people don't even know that they're being presented as army. Fascinating. But it worked. Avshalom also sent forth to set for Achitophel. That's the genius guy, the non-Kohen with the great advice. David's counselor from his town, Gilo, talked about Gilo, when the sacrifices were to be offered. So Gilo is an important thing in the Bible, and we're never going to give it up. Here's how it's spelled in Hebrew. Gilo. He's a Giloni. Giloni. Actually knew a guy named Giloni as the last name. Means he who originates from Gilo. Like if you ever meet someone called Yerushalmi or something like that. Anyway, so the conspiracy gained strength. Someone came and told David, the loyalty of Israel's forces, everybody's moved his way. Levi Yisrael Avshalom, the people's hearts. Now, there was no survey. There wasn't a Harris poll or a Pew, PEW poll that would actually determine what percent of the, it just appeared to be that way. In a way, I just read a very interesting opinion piece by someone. I agree with him. In fact, part of the reason I agree with him is I wrote the same opinion piece a year earlier and didn't get anywhere, and neither is his. But I wrote an opinion piece that the strategic mistake the Jews are making is that we're not going in the streets. We also have 20-year-olds and 30-year-olds. In the United States, we have 6 million, well, we have probably 5 million Jews. And even for the assimilated ones and this, that, the other, we certainly have 1 million Jews who have guts. And if they would be called in the streets, but we don't call the Jews in the streets. The anti-Zionists, anti-Semites, call their people in the streets. And you find on YouTube and on TikTok riots in the streets of London and Paris and Athens, Greece, Altoona, all over the world, Manhattan. And it looks like they really, really have something. Or at the campuses. I wrote a piece, it's still up on YouTube from a year ago. I wrote a piece, I went to college, I went to Columbia. I know how many Jews there are at Columbia. I know how many Jews there are who are pro-Israel. if instead of hiding in the Hillel house, 3,000-4,000 Jews would get out of the damned Hillel house and also go on campus and with Israeli flags, they wouldn't get beaten up. Too many of them. Problem is everybody's afraid. So here's a perfect example from Tanakh. He's out in front, and it looks like he has something, and it's all fake. It's strategy. It's all fake, but fake news also has an impact if you do it right. So he did it right. So now there are people already reporting to David that there's masses, whereupon David said to his people, we better get out of Jerusalem fast, because let's flee at once, or none of us are going to escape alive. He's going to overtake us, bring us down, disaster. So they said to the king, whatever our lord the king wants, we're ready. So here we go. So the king left, started to flee eastward toward the Jordan River, followed by his entire household and all his women. And he had a lot of women. We know 6 wives by name. We know he has pilakshim, concubines. We can imagine how many women he had simply by the text telling us that he took all of them except for 10 concubines, whom he left behind to keep an eye on the place, on the palace. Other than that, call beto. Remember that a king of Israel was allowed to have at least, there are different opinions. There's an opinion of 12, there's an opinion of 18, and there's an opinion of 24. And we learned that in the past. We won't get into it now. But a king is allowed to have either 12, 18, or 24. That's a lot of wives. And pilakshim are separate thing. That's concubines. And he had a bunch of them too. He had 10 he left behind. The king left, followed by all the people, and they basically just got out with 600 Gittites. Those are those Druze-like people who accompanied him from Gat, the land of the Philistines, and they were with him. And he said to Ittai, why should you go with us? You're putting yourself in danger. You're fleeing as a refugee, and you don't need to. If you want to stay in Yerushalayim, stay in Yerushalayim. There's absolutely no reason for Avshalom to doubt your loyalty to him. And if he does doubt your loyalty, he's not going to kill 600 of you based on a hunch. He'll simply exile you all back to God, where you come from. Why put yourselves in my situation? You're a foreigner, and you're in exile from your country. You came only yesterday. Why should I make you wander about? I don't even know where I'm going to end up. When I myself must go wherever I can. I don't know where I'm going to end up. Go back, take your kin with you, etc. And it registers. You're good people. Ittai replied, as God lives, and as my lord the king lives, wherever my lord the king goes, there your servant will be, whether for death or life. He's ready to die with him. Why? I don't know. Why do the Druze? Why are they so loyal to Israel? I don't know. Partly they're a minority in Israel. All right, but I don't want to start naming names, but there are certain minorities in the United States who I don't know that the average person in that minority would say, I love America so much, I'd love to die for America. I think there are certain minorities that would not go that far.
Rabbi, it's analogous to Ruth and Naomi. It's the same deal.
Yeah, very good. Very good. Exactly. And he's even using the same words. And I mentioned that last class, Janet. Thank you very much. Just as Janet points out, when Ruth was saying, where you go, I will go. What you believe, I will believe. Where you're buried, I will be buried. We continue. David said to Ittai, okay, lech va'avor, so come with me. And Ittai came with all of his 600 men and their dependents. They brought their wives and their children. So that's like with wives and children, probably 2,000 of them. And everybody along the way is crying. There are a lot of people who do not go with David, but their hearts are with David. They're too old to go with David. They have their houses. They don't want to leave their houses and essentially be homeless across the Jordan River. But their hearts are with David. And that's how people are, you know. Believe me, there's so many political fights where it becomes clear that someone has won. So people's external loyalties change. But deep in their hearts, that's not really where they are. All right. So the countryside weeps. King crossed the Kidron Valley, Nachal Kidron, etc. Okay. Etc. Now, Tzadok, we talked about the two Kohanim. We said Tzadok, and he's going to become the main one, and Evyatar is the other one. And they're both good. The Evyatar going for Adoniyahu, that's just way later. That's got nothing to do with this. Tzadok appeared with all the Levium, carrying the ark. The Aaron Bris Hashem. We're going to go to battle, we bring the Aaron. We've been learning that for years as a class. When they went to war with the Philistines in the days of Saul, and they went to battle, they always had the ark. Before Saul, in the days of the prophet Shmuel, they had the ark. So they had the ark. They had the Kohens, the Kohanim. I often say Kohen. Some of us don't have the same background, so it helps you know I'm talking about Kohen plural. And the proper Hebrew term for it is Kohanim. And so, since our class grows from time to time, we have new people who don't know the term. Okay. But you bring the ark with you. So you had Tzadok the Kohen, since you have the luxury of two Kohanim. Tzadok is in the front, like the Mashuach Milchama, which we've learned about on Thursdays when we learn the Rambam, Hilchot Milchamot, the laws of war, that there's the Kohen who is ordained to be the leader at wartime. So here they've got the luxury of a second Kohen Gadol, Evyatar, and he brings them up in the back. So in the front and the back, they're surrounded by Kohen Gadols, by Kohanim Gadolim. Okay? And they're bringing the ark. And David says, no, this is not right. The ark belongs in Yerushalayim. Now remember, we haven't built the Beit HaMikdash yet. The Beit HaMikdash will not be built by David in his lifetime, rather by his son Shlomo, Solomon. But God already has made clear by now that Yerushalayim is the place. Har HaBayit, Mount Zion, is the place. That's where the term Zionism comes from. What is Zion? Zion is the proper name of the Temple Mount. So the king said, take the ark back to the city of Yerushalayim. If I find favor with God, I'll be brought back to see it. It's not going anywhere. I'm the one who's going somewhere. And if God brings me back, that's where it belongs. And if he doesn't bring me back, also that's where it belongs. And a very, very big thing here, when we talk about from time to time, and we wonder about some of David's miscues in life, and how did he get to be David Melech Yisrael Chai V'Kayam, the progenitor of Mashiach? This is where David comes in, not only with the writing of Tehillim and stuff, but Hineni Ya'aseh li ka'asher tov beinav. I accept whatever God deems right. All the punishments he felt, and we've learned about how he encountered Sarat, he encountered biblical leprosy, and asked God to be forgiven, and eventually it was only a partial period of time when he was in Hebron. We learned about that. He was 2.5 years in Hebron, and then he went to Yerushalayim, etc., etc. I'm sorry, 7.5 years in Hebron, and then he entered Yerushalayim. And so it's so nice that we don't have to do all that extra background anymore. We've all learned it, refresh our memory, but we know it. And the king said to the Kohen, we don't like to use the word priest. A Kohen is very, very different from what we think of when we talk priest. It's the best word they have. Many translations, Orthodox translations, translate the word Kohen as Kohen, Kohen. And the king said to the Kohen Tzadok, you understand, you return to the safety of the city with your two sons, your own son Achimaaz, and Evyatar's son Yonatan. So here's my strategy. we are out of here. We need spies. So it makes sense, as far as whether Avshalom will be suspicious, it makes sense that even David would have said, bring the ark back to Jerusalem. We don't have the right to move the ark bring it to Jerusalem. We don't have the right to bring it, across the Jordan River. And it makes sense that if the ark is in Jerusalem, that the Kohen Gadol is going to be in Jerusalem. What's the point of having the ark, the Aron Brit Hashem, that offer sacrifices? The only one allowed to offer those sacrifices is the Kohen Gadol. So what can I do? That makes sense. So you go back, Evyatar go back, and if you guys go back, your sons will go back. Achimaatz and Yonatan. That's another Yonatan. It had become a popular Hebrew name by now. And so, and Achimaatz and Yonatan will be the foot soldiers who keep bringing reports. Look, I'm going to linger up here until word comes to me from you. So your job is to be spies. Now I've got, how many spies? 5 spies already. I've got the 2 Kohens, Tzadok and Evyatar. I've got their sons Achimaatz and Yonatan. And I just sent Chushai, the elderly guy, to be the counterfoil to Achitophel. Okay. Tzadok and Evyatar brought the Ark of God back to Jerusalem, and they stayed there. David, meanwhile, went up to the slope of Har HaZeitim, Mount of Olives, Malei HaZeitim, weeping as he went. Mount of Olives, Har HaZeitim, that's like Mount Scopus. You can see the Temple Mount and the temple from the Mount of Olives. Many, many people are buried in the Mount of Olives. It's become a huge cemetery because it is the single most desirable place. Now it's hard to get a spot anymore. Most desirable place for a Jew to be buried, because we believe we're only living temporarily in this world, Olam Hazeh. By God's grace, Chaste Hashem, if we merit, we will be raised from the dead for a world to come, Messianic times, Olam Haba. And the people who are buried in Har HaZeitim will be the first ones to see the Beit HaMikdash. As they come out, the Beit HaMikdash will be rising. So that's primo territory, seriously primo. And if for one reason or another that's not accessible, to be buried in Eretz Yisrael, ideally in Yerushalayim and near Yerushalayim. Rebbe Tzanel and Zechron Livracha and I have grave sites at the Rabbinical Council of America section of a grave and cemetery just outside Yerushalayim, where a whole bunch of American organizations, OEU, Young Israel, RCA I mentioned, just about all the organizations have sections. Members can arrange to be in that section, and so on and so forth, and to be buried anywhere in Eretz Yisrael. So he went up to Har HaZeitim, and he was in mourning, Mourning. He was in mourning. His head was covered like an ashes. Rosh lo chafui, v'hu holech yachef. He walked barefoot. Person sitting shiva, they put a little bit. You don't have to. Some put some ashes in their hair. Take a piece of paper, light it, gather a few little ashes on a plate, and then sprinkle a bit on the hair. And they take off the leather shoes, and they're barefoot or in stockings, socks. And all the people who were with him also covered their heads with ashes and wept as they went up. David was told Achitophel, that's the wise man who had been his counselor, who turned to the other side and became Avshalom's counselor, was among the conspirators with Avshalom. And he prayed, Sakel na et atzat Achitophel, Hashem. Oh God, please confound, frustrate Achitophel's counsel, meaning either make it that incredibly this genius of a man give bad counsel, Or if that's not possible, equally miraculously good, make it that he gives good counsel, but that someone like my guy, Chushai, gives opposite counsel, and by miracle, Avshalom accepts Chushai's counsel for war strategy. When David reached the top, where people would prostrate themselves to God, Chushai the Archite was there to meet him with his robe torn. You know, you're in mourning, so they do kriya, they tear the garment, karua kutanto. Everyone, many of you know that at the time of a death, the rabbi comes with a little knife and helps the person tear their garment, or they tear it themselves, shirt, blouse. So he's torn his robe in mourning. He has earth, adama al rosho. He has sprinkled earth on his head. He's in mourning, as are all those watching how the king of Israel, they don't know yet that he's exactly the fullness with which he's progenitor of Mashiach. They don't know that yet. He hasn't built the Beit HaMikdash yet. But they know that they're with like George Washington. I mean, obviously no comparison, Abraham Lincoln. They know this is not just another president on a list of 47, that this is someone different. Whether it was Washington, Lincoln, some might say Andrew Jackson, I don't want to get into it. They knew that David is something different. And they were all in mourning, like sitting Shiva. And David said, if you march with me, you're going to be a burden. You're elderly. We're going to have to keep an eye on you to protect you in battle. Probably going to have to send 3 or 4 guys to surround you, because the other side will come at you from every direction. You do me a much better job if you go back to the city and say to Avshalom, I will be your servant, O king. I was your father's servant formerly, and now I'll be yours. And then, my dear friend, you can nullify Achitophel's counsel. You will have the Kohanim, Tzadok and Evyatar there. You won't be alone. Then, whatever you achieve, you can get the word to them. That's not suspicious for you to be talking to the Kohanim Gedolim in Jerusalem at the Har HaBayit. You can report everything that you hear to them. And then they'll figure out how to get it to their sons. Their 2 sons are there with them. Tzadok son Achimaatz and Evyatar's son Yonatan. And through them, you can report to me everything you hear, and they'll come running and bring it to me. We don't have like a messenger carrier pigeons, like Harry Potter, but it'll work. And so Chushai, the friend of David, Re'eh David, he was David's, not only his counselor. Everybody we've been learning about is a soldier of David, a servant of David. He is a friend of David. So there's a closeness, even though we haven't really heard about it. Barely. But we're being told there's a unique relationship. And it makes sense. They're both very elderly. And they've been together a long time. And just as Chushai enters Yerushalayim, Avshalom also happens at that moment to be entering Yerushalayim. Just wanted to show you, and we're going to go a little more, but I wanted to show you. Last year, there's pictures from this year also, but I wanted to show you from last year. This is a little bit complicated. I'm going to keep it short and sweet. I want it for the image, but as with so much, it's so hard to to give you the image without also giving you the background. And I don't want to go into a long chai. So let me just put it short and sweet. There's a debate. Who owns the Temple Mount? The answer is the Jews own the Temple Mount. Now you know everything that a 5th grader knows and a 1st grader. The Jews own the Temple Mount. Israel owns the Temple Mount. Unfortunately, in 1967, the defense minister was Moshe Dayan, who was more of a coward than the public image is meant to be. He was courageous at one time in battle 10 years earlier, maybe more courageous than I can imagine. But over time, as he encountered more battles and became a politician, he became a coward. We know he became a coward. We know he had a mental breakdown in 2 different wars. And in 67, you've learned it from me many different times in many different contexts. He gave orders to Matagor not to take the Temple Mount. And Matagor was countermanded by someone who had no authority to countermand him, namely the chief rabbi of the army, Avshalom Gorin, and said, look, Jewish history is going to record one of 2 things. General Matagor liberated Jerusalem, or General Matagor could have liberated Jerusalem and left it in the hands of the Arabs. So you decide. As rabbi, I'm telling you, God's will is that you take Jerusalem, the mountain. And Matagor took the mountain, and when Dayan went crazy on him later, Matagor said, there was static in the walkie-talkies. I couldn't hear you. I heard you saying something like, take a mountain. I didn't hear the word don't. So anyway, to this day, Israel signed a deal afterwards that they would let the Jordanian Muslim tribunal control the Temple Mount. It is an agreed upon contract that Moshe Dayan agreed to with the Arabs to prevent the world from getting angry at us, because the world is not going to get angry at us if we do the right thing. And the deal is we are not allowed to exert any sovereignty over the Temple Mount. It belongs to the Jordanians, and it's specifically run by the Jordanian Islamic Religious Tribunal, where they have the Al-Aqsa Mosque, yada, yada. Not only are we not allowed to build anything there, no Jew is allowed to recite a bracha. Initially, it was no Jews allowed to walk up there. And then it became, we're going to walk up there, but no Jew is allowed to talk. Because even if you're whispering, my name is Dov, maybe I was saying a bracha, what were you whispering? So no Jews allowed to talk on the Temple Mount. And then people started talking quietly. My name is Dov. And then over time, they started to say a bracha. They'd come with a little something shakel nebed v'ra. And that would cause major international repercussions from Jordan and Saudi Arabia, that Jews were heard reciting blessings, prayers on the Temple Mount. And over the course of 67, and now it's not in 2025, 33, 20, over 58 years, we've been stretching and stretching and stretching. The only real problem for me is that a substantial number of rabbinic authorities who believe that Israel is sovereign over the Temple Mount have ruled, nevertheless, that a Jew is not allowed to set foot on the Temple Mount because it's so holy. And because we all have been in cemeteries for burials, we are tamei, we all have the impurity, and there's not the time of the red heifer. And so, you know me, I'm a big, big nationalist, and I have never set foot on the Temple Mount. I don't plan ever to set foot on the Temple Mount because of religious beliefs. And I have a lot of people, I wrote it once or twice, and I have people in my camp who really give me an earful. Fortunately, I'm hard of hearing now, but they give me an earful about how could you say not to go in the Temple Mount? That's what we're doing. I said, look, I'm not criticizing you. I follow the majority of Orthodox rabbis who have poskened we're not allowed to set foot on the Temple Mount because the land is so holy, they're not allowed to do it. So I'm giving you that background because I'm going to show you Jews prostrating on the Temple Mount, but I don't want you to walk away thinking that Rabbi Fischer taught us that actually, if we're ever touring and we have the opportunity, we're allowed to do that too. Because I follow the majority halachic opinion, which is not the same group as the Haredis that don't want to serve in the army. I'm a religious nationalist who believes that we should not be doing that, but I want to see it because this is what it looks like when Jews prostrate on the Temple Mount. So, and the big guy for that is Itamar Ben-Gvir, the more right-wing Israeli minister And now that he's in the cabinet, he does it like on Tisha B'Av, when we remember the destruction of the temple and other Yom Yerushalayim. On any occasion that there's an excuse to go up, he brings a bunch of people, and here's what, and Arabs go crazy. The Arabs are going absolutely crazy. But this year, the reaction is a little bit more stifled because Hamas, who normally threaten that they will incinerate Israel, this year they're busy with other things. But here you go, just a quick sense.
Dozens of Jewish worshippers openly prayed and bowed in the Temple Mount on Tuesday, blatantly defying the sensitive status quo procedures for the Flashpoint site. They received support from Israel's national security minister and another minister, both visiting the site to mark Tisha B'Av, the day of mourning over the destruction of the two ancient Jewish temples that stood at the site.
We're on Tisha B'Av, the Temple Mount. We have come here to commemorate the destruction of the temple. It should be said honestly that there is very, very great progress here in the governance, in sovereignty, in images of Jews praying. Our policy is to allow prayer, but I also say one more thing. We must win this war. We must win, not go to summits in Doha or Cairo, but to defeat them, to bring them down to their knees. This is the message. We can defeat Hamas and bring them down to their knees.
Considered the holiest site in Judaism and the third holiest site for Muslims, the Temple Mount and Al-Aqsa Mosque compound is governed by a vague, unwritten status quo. Under these agreements, non-Muslims may visit the site in the heart of Jerusalem's Old City, but are not allowed to pray. However, these limitations have been increasingly eroded in recent years. So before visits by Jews, they receive special instructions from the police, under the responsibility of Minister Ben-Gvir.
We ask that you adhere to the instructions of the police. Religious worship of any kind is prohibited on the Temple Mount, including the entry of holy utensils. Singing, protesting, or clapping are not allowed.
Jordan and Egypt slammed Ben-Gvir's visit, calling it an irresponsible provocation. It was also condemned by Israeli politicians, secular and Orthodox, with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu saying through his office that there is, quote, no change to Temple Mount status quo and that Ben-Gvir has no private policy. In response, Ben-Gvir doubled down and issued a defiant statement claiming his policy is to enable freedom of worship for Jews at all places, including the Temple Mount, and that Jews will continue to do so in the future as well. Palestinians consider such acts as a provocation aimed at taking over the site. In fact, there is no other issue more effective in incitement campaigns by Palestinian terror groups. And despite Israel being at war, its national security minister continues to challenge the fragile status quo, and not just on the Temple Mount.
And there you go. So let's go back to where we are as we a little bit more time, and we'll just wrap up now. We got 5 minutes, but 5 minutes is precious. We can do stuff in 5 minutes. Okay, here we go. So we finished chapter 15, and any commentary that I prepared on chapter 15? Let's see, perhaps not. I'll go really quickly if I don't find any. Just give me a moment here. Okay. First of all, let's see where this is from. Chapter 15. Okay, 1 or 2 commentaries. So I explained that already. This way I go quicker. Right, I explained to you that Lefi Pshat HaKatuv Yir'eh Ki Piresh Vayal Evyatar Nistalek L'Tzad Echad Ima Aaron. So what is happening here is Radak is explaining that there are 2 Kohen Gadol, Kohanim Gedolim, but it is passing to Tzadok from Evyatar. Rabbotenu Zichronam Levracha, Zayin Lamed Zichronam, our rabbis of blessed memory, Kiblu, have a tradition, they understood. Ki ba'oto hayom nistalek Evyatar mikahuna gedola. On that very day that David left Jerusalem to march to a place of sanctuary, on that day, Evyatar's kahuna, his status as Kohen Gadol, actually disappeared, evaporated. Vichniso Tzadok Tachtav. And Tzadok became actually the sole, S-O-L-E, Kohen Gadol. However, it was not yet formally announced to the people. V'lama nistalek ba'oto hayom. And why did Evyatar lose his kahuna that day? Ki sha'al ba'urim v'tumim v'lo ne'eneh. Because when David said, let's not bring the Aron Brit Hashem, the Holy Ark, with us to exile, but let's leave it in Jerusalem, Evyatar still was wearing the ephod, the priestly breastplate, and the Urim and Tumim, the priestly breastplate with the 12 jewelry stones, with jewel stones, and the piece of paper, parchment, inside with the Urim and Tumim by which a Kohen Gadol could ask a question of God. And so Evyatar respectfully, and it was accepted respectfully, asked King David, it's not in the text, it's in the Kabbalah, in our tradition. He asked King David, would it be okay if I first ask God to make sure God wants us to leave the Aron in Yerushalayim and not bring it with us to exile, since we are God's, the faction God is with? And David said, go ahead, ask the Urim and Tumim. Evyatar asked, and for the first time in his service, during the time he'd been Kohen God, he received no answer. Not a yes, not a no, no answer. The lights did not light. Tzadok sha'al v'ne'eneh. So then, kind of shrugging his shoulder, he looked at Tzadok and said, maybe you should ask. And Tzadok asked, and the lights lit. And that made clear that God now has transferred the authority of the Kahuna Gedola from Evyatar, with whom God is not answering, to whom God's not answering questions, over to Tzadok. And this is Shapiresh B'Sefer Yoshua, and so on and so forth. It was explained in the book of Joshua, Ki hasho'el ba'urim v'tumim hakohen anishal ruach hakodesh shura alav, that a person who inquires of God by the Urim and Tumim and receives an answer, that is an absolute confirmation that that person is God's choice for the Kohen Gadol. And therefore, last thing I'm showing you is from 1 Samuel. We're in 2 Samuel chapter 16. 1 Samuel chapter 2. That's the chapter after the Haftarah we read on Rosh Hashanah when Hannah prays for a baby, and she gets a baby Shmuel, whom she gives to Eli the Kohen to rear. But meantime, Eli the Kohen has the sons Bafni and Pinchas, and they are the up-and-coming Kohen Gadols, but they sin, and God punishes. And God says to Eli, and this is to refresh your memory, with this we end, why then do you maliciously trample upon the sacrifices and offerings that I've commanded, having your two sinful sons as the ones offering those sacrifices? You have honored your sons more than me, feeding on the first portions of every offering of my people Israel. Assuredly, declares the eternal, the God of Israel, I intended for you, Eli, and your father's house, your descendants, to remain in my service forever. But now, declares God, far be it from me, for I honor those who honor me. Ki michabdai achabed uvozai yekalu. I honor those who honor me, but those who spurn me shall be dishonored. A time shall come, hineya imim ba'im, when I will break your power and that of your father's house. The lineage will be ended, and there shall be no elder in your house. You will gaze ruefully at all the bounty that will be taken from your household and bestowed on Israel, but they're not going to be a zaken, an elder in your home. It'll go to another Kohen line. I shall not cut off all your offspring from my altar, but to make your eyes pine and your spirit languish. All the increase in your house shall die as ordinary men. None shall be made Kohen Gadol. And this shall be a sign for you that I mean it. The fate of your two sons, Chafni and Pinchas, they shall both die on the same day. And they did at battle. And I will raise up for myself a faithful priest who will act in accordance with my wishes and my purposes. I will build for him an enduring lineage, house, and he shall walk before my anointed forever. And all the survivors of your house, last of whom is Evyatar, shall come and bow low to him. That would be Tzadok, for the sake of a money fee and a loaf of bread, that this is what you did. You gave it all up, your sons gave it up for the honor of and making some money off the kahuna. So we go into chapter 16 next week, God willing. Thanks very much for being with me. There's a beautiful turnout, and feel free to share the link with people you think would benefit from that movie we did the other day on Tisha B'Av about the deep state. But thank you so much for being here. It's going to get more and more really intense.